Later in that same scene, around line 375, I may have up. No, I didn't. All right, so I think we've probably gotten about as much mileage as we can get out of talking about Othello's change from, extremely eloquent to not eloquent, from what seems to be incredibly civilized to astonishingly barbaric, but then at the end seeming eloquent and civilized as he dispenses justice to the individual whom he feels is most responsible, which is himself. So I think we're about good for that topic. The last question, though, I would ask you to consider. Othello's suicide at the end. Is this truly an act of redemption or of justice? Or is it just one more bit of savagery? I don't know. Maybe the question is simply rhetorical, but it's a thing to consider. Okay, so let's now move on to something that also has to do with justice. There is a series of, essentially, trials in the play, and each trial is a little bit different than the one before it, and the degree of justice in the trials I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot. The COVID-19 thing, we're supposed to be wearing masks. I totally forgot. Hang on just a second, please.
Act 1, Scene 3. Brabantio is the accuser, Othello the accused. The Duke is the judge. There are witnesses, and the accused is given a chance to defend himself. The trial is fair. Justice is served. Compare that with the next trial in Act... Excuse me. What? You kidding me? Damn. Not this kind of mask. Excuse me for a moment.
Okay, so let's compare that trial with the trial in Act 2, Scene 3. Iago is the accuser, Cassio is the accused, and Othello is the judge. Cassio is drunk, so really has no opportunity to defend himself. The trial is essentially unfair. This is quite different from in Act 1, when Othello was the accused and justice was served. Justice is not served when Cassio is tried. I'm sorry. What now? I'm okay. I'm sorry. That sounded kind of short, but well, now I feel stupid. Apparently, COVID-19 is not a computer virus, so no masks are needed for this. Pardon me again, one moment.
All right, let's keep going. Now, I do like the cape, so I'll just keep that. Act 5, Scene 2, lines 26 through 90 or so. Desdemona is the accused. Othello is both the accuser and the judge and the executioner. The accused's attempts to defend herself are dismissed, out of hand. The trial is completely unfair. Justice, as we know because we have read the play, we know what Othello does not know. Justice is not served. By the way, that's a type of irony. It's called dramatic irony. That's when the audience knows something that the characters do not know. And this dramatic irony plays a role in our perception of how unfair and how tragic that trial in Act 5, Scene 2, lines 26 through about 90 is. The final trial in the play is later in Act 5. Emilia is the accuser. Othello is the accused. He is also the judge, and he is his own executioner. Is justice served in this trial? That is hard to determine. We know that the person who committed murder gets the death sentence, sentenced by and carried out by himself. Is this just? That is a question that lingers. So, that series of 4 trials in the play, proceeding from fair, resulting in justice, to, in the third trial, absolutely unfair, with a conclusion that is entirely unjust, and then the final trial, in which justice might be served, but the trial, nonetheless, is extremely questionable. Let's talk a little bit about the change that Othello goes through from trusting Desdemona to being completely untrusting and entirely jealous. It's a quick change, but a dramatic one. Around line 203, Othello says that he must see something that is evidence or proof before he will even begin to doubt. Later in that same scene, around line 375, Othello apparently grabs Iago by the throat and says that he, Othello, must have the ocular proof. So before, Othello had said he must see, and then upon seeing, he must have proof, and then he might begin to doubt. But now, at line 375, ocular proof, Othello is regarding seeing itself as proof, and there seems to be no space or nothing in between seeing proof and his not just doubting, but believing Iago's claims that Desdemona is being unfaithful. By the time we get to around line 465, Othello needs nothing. He needs to see nothing. He needs no proof. He has already gone beyond doubting. He has completely accepted Iago's lies and completely accepts that Desdemona is being unfaithful. So, the change to jealousy, Othello begins by saying he must see, and upon seeing, he must then have proof before he even begins to doubt. Shortly thereafter, with the reference to ocular proof, Othello has come to regard seeing as proof itself, and upon seeing, he will take it as proof and go beyond doubt to surety. And then by the end of the scene, around line 456, Othello needs nothing. He believes entirely that Desdemona is unfaithful. Right after that point comes the wedding, really. Now, shortly before the action of the play, apparently there had been a wedding. Othello and Desdemona had been wed. Well, right at the end of Act 3, Scene 3, we have another wedding of a sort. Othello and Iago kneel. Iago pledges himself to Othello, and Othello accepts him completely. At this point, Othello has rejected love and has embraced dishonesty and hatred. So let's talk about Desdemona a little bit here. She does not help her own case. Now, this is not blaming the victim. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're just pointing out a series of unfortunate events, actually. In Act 1, Brabantio warns Othello. He says, "She hath betrayed her father. She may well betray thee," or something to that effect. Act 3, Scene 3, early, around line 40 and lines following, just before Iago begins to really work on Othello, Desdemona badgers Othello very insistently, very pointedly, about getting Cassio back into Othello's good graces. Now, this is the opportunity Iago has waited for. He has waited for Desdemona to say something about Cassio, to appear she is very concerned about him. And Desdemona's doing that really sets the stage, so to speak, for Iago then to do what he does. Around line 220 in Act 3, Scene 3, Iago points out to Othello, correctly, that Desdemona before had deceived the man to whom she should have been loyal and honest, her father. This ties in very well with what her father, Brabantio, had said to Othello back in Act 1. Act 3, Scene 4, twice Desdemona again with the Cassio talk. Could this come at a worse point for her? Not really. Act 3, Scene 4, lines 85-ish through about 100, Desdemona keeps pounding the nails in her own coffin. Again, she won't shut the up about Cassio, and she lies about the handkerchief. And Othello knows she's lying. Not good. And then in Act 4, Scene 1, around line 220, again, more Cassio talk from Desdemona. Now, at this point, again, we have that dramatic irony where we, the audience, know something that the characters don't know. We know both that Desdemona is innocent and that her talking about Cassio to Othello is confirming Othello's ideas that she is disloyal to him with Cassio. So, and again, this is not blaming the victim. This is simply pointing out the tragedy that happens through ignorance, complete ignorance of what is going on. Desdemona makes herself appear guilty, and it's just gut-wrenching to see. Critics, and this observation is not original with me. I don't recall where I ran across it, but it's not mine. So I just want to, get that out of the way up front. But critics often write, when they refer to Desdemona, or they refer to Ophelia, or they refer to Cordelia in King Lear, often critics will write about the character's naivete, and they frequently use the adjective shocking naivete, as though being naive is something that is bad. It's not. And I think that the frequent reference to naivete as shocking reveals really nothing about the works or the characters, but it does reveal the degree of cynicism that the critics, the scholars writing about the plays have. Now, it's not universal, but it comes up quite a bit. And You know, one of the things that we can use literature for is a mirror to ourselves. By looking at how we respond to the literature, we can, if we're willing to step out of ourselves and try to look at what we say objectively, we can make some observations about our own culture, or at least our own habits, when looking at literature, by looking at how we respond to it. And the fact that so many critics refer to naivete as shocking, and there's another pretty common negative modifier that I just can't come up with right now, reveals something, I think, about the cynicism, if not of our culture, at least of my profession, that of professing literature, that of being a critic or a scholar of literature. Now, speaking of naivete, Othello. Othello in Act 1 tells us that he doesn't really know much about anything other than war. Apparently, he wooed Desdemona by telling her war stories of himself, and she fell into pity, which they both took as love for him. Further, look at how easily Iago manages to fool Othello. The Moor is of a free and trusting nature that thinks men honest that but appear to be so, says Iago, or something to that effect. Indeed, that free and open nature, that willingness to trust what one sees, Iago takes advantage of that quality that Othello has, a quality that we could define as a form of naivete.